Hey, listeners, welcome back to the Psychedelic Podcast. Today we have Sam Mandel, the co-founder and CEO of Ketamine Clinics Los Angeles, KCLA, a leading mental health center that has pioneered ketamine-assisted therapies for conditions like depression, PTSD, and anxiety. Since 2014, Sam has helped to expand access to ketamine treatments, overseeing 30,000 plus infusions, which is incredible. Sam and I first met at a psychedelic conference, I believe it was Wonderland in 2022, where I had a chance to hang out with your dad as well, who is a character and an incredible human. So this podcast has been a long time coming, Santa. I'm glad to be sitting across from you and chatting about KCLA.
Yeah, likewise, Paul. Thank you for having me.
So I feel like it's important that we do honor your dad and acknowledge the work that he did as part of this. So I'd love to just open up with tell us a little bit about your father. And tell us, why was he inspired to start KCLA way back in the day when this wasn't nearly as prominent and popular as it is today?
Yeah. So we definitely agree. My father is an amazing guy and a real character. He and I co-founded the clinic together in 2014. So we've been providing IV infusions of ketamine for mental health full-time for 11 years now. And his background is interesting. He did everything short of his dissertation towards his PhD in clinical psychology when he decided to go to medical school and become an anesthesiologist. So he maintained a personal and professional interest in mental health, even though he was working in ORs and in various settings with anesthesia and using a lot of ketamine for sedation. So when the research came out that ketamine, this anesthetic that he was an expert at using, was found to be very effective at treating mood, it was really the perfect blend of both of his worlds. Myself, I grew up in environments where my friends and my family and the people around me were really suffering from issues with mental health and addiction, lost people at a young age to suicide. My own challenges along the way. I've, sought out different solutions and, methods of dealing with my own challenges. And so I was really interested in the mind and in human suffering. And when I was 12, I volunteered for Teen Line, which is a teen-to-teen suicide prevention line. And a couple days a week after high school, I took calls from kids in crisis. And that was my first more kind of formal exposure to trying to support people in acute crisis for mental health. And I just maintained a kind of status in my social circle as someone who, I don't know if I would call it a status, but kind of a reputation is maybe a better word, for someone who people could go and talk to and have difficult conversations with and not shy away from them or be, brush them off or be, made to be too uncomfortable to have them. So that's just kind of my background and how I came to this. And my dad and I decided to start the clinic together, and it's been quite a journey since. We have very humble beginnings. It was, fully self-funded. We didn't get any kind of VC, PE, or any other kind of, capital involved or anyone else. It was just the two of us for a long time, and started out in a literal closet in Santa Monica, where he was doing anesthesia for a plastic surgeon, and asked if we could sublet some space. And they only had a storage room, like literally 8 by 7 foot, tiny little room that we made our office. Our first office was a plastic folding table, 2 folding chairs, and 2 laptops, and that was it. I got literally a Motorola flip phone from Radio Shack, prepaid. That was the first business phone. And we saw patients in the adjacent OR recovery area outside of that room, which was a little bit bigger, but not much. And there's 2, basically beds divided by a curtain, kind of like akin to a hospital room. And that's how we started. And now, fast forward 11 years, we have a full-time multidisciplinary team of 15, 5,000 square foot office. It's purpose built. It's a very beautiful and, serene space that really promotes the transformation that we're committed to. And it's been a hell of a ride. I'll tell you that much. Yeah.
What was it? I mean, I'm curious, Sam, what was it like? Because in 2014, very few people were talking about psychedelics. Very few people were discussing ketamine. A mutual friend of ours, someone who's been on the podcast, Jeff Becker, who's a well-known and well-respected psychiatrist, had been exploring ketamine for some time, but he was one of the very few. So to come on the scene in 2014 and really open up and offer this, I would imagine took some took some cojones. And I'm curious, at least for those first 1 to 2 to 3 years, how was business? What was the sort of feedback that you were getting from people? What was the sort of response from the community, from your friends? How did those early days go for you when starting KCLA?
Yeah, I mean, no one supported it and no one really understood it. We were thought of as really crazy. It was seen as a very extreme thing to do. Unfortunately, a lot of people still feel that way, much, much less than back in 2014. No one, I mean, even medical professionals were like, you're experimenting on people. What are you doing? This is crazy. It was a lot of criticism that we both received. And, not only the average person who didn't really know anything about it, but even people working within healthcare or mental health didn't know. And again, it surprises me to this day that still in 2025, we have a lot of people who are misinformed or uninformed about this treatment. And, you don't have to be super enthusiastic about it. You don't have to be an expert at it. You don't have to do it or offer it or be involved in it. But the fact that if you're working in mental health in 2025 and you don't even know at least a little bit about this, you don't have an interest or a curiosity in it, even a little bit, I think that's a huge red flag personally. And I'm surprised always at how many people I meet who actually are that way. So anyways, so when we started out, it was seen as a really radical thing, and no one would refer to us, and no one wanted anything really to do with it except for the patients who we took care of, who were most desperate because they had really tried everything else and not benefited. So, and for us though, it was like when we first saw those first patients and the transformations that they underwent. I mean, it was just I really felt an obligation to do this work, like whether I liked it or not. And there were many, many hundreds of times I could have quit or gone and done something else because it's been really, really hard work grinding this out brick by brick and building something that there was really no blueprint for. And the people who had their lives transformed and saved through this and who still continue to every day is what really keeps me going. And it's what I know was a source of strength and energy for both of us when we received so much criticism, because none of that it was noise, and the noise didn't matter because we were seeing what this medicine could do and what its potential was. And the fact that it really wasn't available elsewhere, we just felt like we have to offer this. Like, it's not even really an option. We had an early patient, I remember one in particular, she literally had saved money to pay for her own funeral after she committed suicide because she didn't want to burden her family with the funeral expenses. And she used that money to pay for treatment instead and had an amazing benefit and took the difference between what treatment cost and what she saved and went on a vacation with her kids. I mean, this is like, I can tell you, dozens of stories like that. When you see that and you see people with 10, 20, 30 years of intractable depression, complex treatment-resistant PTSD who have tried many medications and oftentimes even TMS or ECT, inpatient hospitalizations, and nothing helps them, and they're really totally hopeless. And within a week or two, they're thriving and they're excited to live life. There's nothing like that. Just to be a part of that is priceless.
So having that courage to start in 2014, I imagine getting that flywheel going of an initial client base was a grind early on, a slog early on. And yet you're here now 11, nearly 12 years later. You've done over 30,000 infusions, which I don't have a stat board on me, but I would imagine you probably have served, you might be number one in terms of the absolute number of clients that you've served in that way, because a lot of clinics have not been around for all that long. And so I'm curious, across the span of these last 11 years, supporting over 30,000 infusions with ketamine, what are just some patterns that you've noticed and recognized around great treatment? Like when you're really supporting someone with ketamine infusions, what defines and what have you learned about what it means to provide great treatment and great support in that process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think we could talk about that one question for the rest of this entire discussion, because there's so much that goes into it. I would say first and foremost, we're very patient-centric, and we really believe in individualizing treatment. We really strive to help people to feel comfortable and safe throughout every step of this process, to let them know that they are, we recognize their uniqueness, that they matter, that we care about them, that we genuinely do care for them, and we really are working to help them to feel better We want that. We want to celebrate their wins with them. So I think a lot of that kind of falls under the umbrella of the therapeutic relationship. And that's really big for us. And from the moment someone first calls the clinic to when they become a patient to after they complete their initial course of treatment, which is 6 infusions over 2 to 3 weeks, every step of that way, we want every email, text, phone call, interaction in person in the office for them to really feel valued and cared for. And our entire team, admin and clinical, are aligned with that. And so that's something that I think is really important. And, one of the reasons why we have an 83% success rate. If you look at the literature...
What does that mean, Sam, in terms of success?
Yeah, so success is determined by, generally speaking, a clinical response, which is a 50% or greater reduction of symptoms. We look at various mood assessments. We utilize the Beck-2, the MADRS, PHQ-9, and GAD-7 for every patient at baseline and then throughout the course of their treatment. So we get quantitative data as well as qualitative. We also send out a satisfaction survey, and even just looking at the question of, rate the level of relief that you've received on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like incredible or whatever the word that's in that place is. And people are averaging, we've had many, many hundreds of surveys completed, and they're averaging 8 out of 10. And then we're seeing the scores on these other more standardized mood assessments. Usually a clinical response. We see people who are having, literally at the very high ends of these scales, severe depression, oftentimes going all the way down into minimal to no depression at all. Wow. And then being able to sustain that with boosters or follow-up care. So one of the reasons why we have an 83% success rate and the literature shows around 50 to 70% is because in research, you have to look at a protocol that is kind of a one-size-fits-all. You have to control these variables, right? And ensure, these controls are the same. For us, we're a treatment center, not a research center. And one of the things that we do is really individualizing the treatment. So the rate of the infusion and the total dosing. And that is generally determined as a starting point based on the patient's weight, but then we can have many standard deviations from that, up or down as needed. And so people are able to really get the right amount of medicine for them. And it's also a moving target. So what works well for one patient on their first visit is almost surely not going to be the same rate or dose they're going to get on their last visit. There's so many variables that have an impact on the experience and on the, results. And so I would say with, over 30,000 infusions, where the art meets the science, the kind of actual experience of doing this work day in and day out at such a high volume is what really enables us to judge where people are at and find the right fit for them in terms of the protocol. And that makes a big difference. We also start people a little bit higher. We're working with around 0.6 milligrams of ketamine per kilogram of body weight, instead of 0.5 milligram per kilogram. So it's a little more medicine, actually about 20% more. And then we're also providing a 50 to 55 minute long infusion, whereas the literature is about 40 minutes. So I don't mean to get too deep into the weeds or too technical here, but some of the things that we're doing that are a little bit different are what we feel are producing part of at least why we're able to produce better results. But, bottom line, just to go back to your question of what's, good care look like, I think it really is a combination of the things that I'm talking about is the human element and how people are treated and the care and really TLC, frankly, that goes into it. And individualizing it, being willing and able to, and not just following a one size fits all. But the other side of that is on the more technical stuff that I'm talking about, really striving for excellence and innovating and paying attention to the details, like hundreds and hundreds of details really do add up and compound to result in huge changes in outcomes. And so while there's some big things I could point to, like utilizing a digital syringe pump instead of an IV bag, so we can really precisely fine-tune dosing, among other things, I would say that most of what I think really makes us great is our attention to detail. And what makes good care is attention to detail. And I could go on about that, but I'll stop there for a moment.
Well, and I think what I love about the partnership that you have with your dad is, he's a anesthesiologist, trained clinical medical doctor. You are not necessarily someone who has a clinical background. And I feel like that's a really nice balance and partnership. And so I'm also curious to go a little bit deeper into that. Like, how has your role as CEO really shaped the evolution of KCLA, and what blind spots do you think clinicians often have when building ketamine clinics who maybe don't have the same level of business background that you do, for example?
Yeah, I think it is a beautiful partnership in that way. And for many other reasons, we really balance one another out. I'm not a clinician. I don't even have really a formal business background. I've always been entrepreneurial, but I didn't go to college for an MBA or anything like that. So for me, we really are mission driven. I really am led by passion and curiosity and a desire to make a meaningful difference for people. And that really informs the way that the practice has been built. And I have an ability to put myself in the patient or prospective patient's shoes and really think through what it is or what's occurring for them on the other side of the different steps of the process. And also just asking what next endlessly. So, it's like, okay, so someone sees the website, then what happens, right? And then they call us or they fill out a form. Well, then what? And so they talk to someone. Well, what does that conversation look like? How do they feel? What information is critically reviewed, right? And of course, I'm informed by my father's medical background along the way to make sure that clinically things are dialed in. But as far as my role and my question is also helping to get him to put that into a framework that actually works in ways that he might not have initially thought about. Because I think, to answer your question, clinicians generally, I think a lot of stuff might seem they just assume that it's something that other people know or understand. So, I'm able to help put things into layman's terms, kind of translate. A lot of clinicians, I think, go based on they want to kind of go based on their judgment in the moment because they want to think about things as they come and have their medical decision making, which is great. And also you need a structure and a framework to scale anything. And I don't mean just scale like, big business, 100 clinics. I mean, even to scale to have like other staff even in one clinic, or to ensure that you can even accommodate more than a small handful of patients. So how do you look at quality control? How do you look at maintaining, systems and processes to accommodate more people, or to ensure that as more people join the team? Because like I said, we have 15 people now. We have psychiatrists, psych NPs, RNs, admins. How do you make sure that everyone is delivering this medicine in a consistent fashion? And I think it's, finding that balance between, again, really personalizing, individualizing care. Clinicians have their own individual medical decision-making, clinical judgment on a case-by-case basis. And at the same time, there is a structure and a framework that people are operating within at the same time. So it's a balance. And I think I've been, good at helping to define that and put some of those policies in place. I think, one thing that was part of our growing pains was, my dad kind of just wanted to address the things as they came up. And I'm like, well, we got to kind of create some systems around some of this stuff, because you're not the only one now, right? That is going to be seen or interacting with the patient. And you can't just leave it up to 100% up to judgment of another without any sort of guidelines. Right. So, and also like there's no training around this treatment in school. There's no training. There's hardly anyone doing it in the real world. So, there's a lot of learning for providers who might be experts at mental health or experts at other aspects of this or experts at utilizing ketamine, but they don't really know how this uniquely multidisciplinary, multi-specialty modality kind of comes together. So you have psychiatrists, they understand mental health, but they don't know anything about starting IVs or utilizing anesthetics like ketamine. And you have anesthesiologists who are typically expert with the latter, but then they don't know about mental health. My dad had this nice blended background with his studies in clinical psychology. And then again, the personal interest that he also had because of our family and the situations that we went through with the suffering of people in the family. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, a lot of layers, a lot going on. Hopefully that answered your question. I feel like I jumped around a little bit.
Well, no, but you mentioned this sort of multimodality, multi-specialty, and that's the next thing that I wanted to go into, because when you started in 2014, clearly, the focus was on ketamine, and this is in your branding, the Ketamine Clinics of Los Angeles, but you're not just offering ketamine, you're offering healing and transformational treatment. So I'm curious, when you look at bringing in practitioners, psychiatrists, psych NPs, what other modalities are you starting to weave into that process for folks that isn't just explicitly ketamine, but maybe forms of talk therapy or EMDR or TMS or, other practices that can be supportive for someone in their healing journey outside of just the medication itself?
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, we added general psychiatry, and soon after that, transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. When I say general psychiatry, for those who may not know, I mean psychiatric evaluations, medication management, managing people's prescriptions, right? Both in person and through telehealth, so we can see anyone anywhere in California for that service. And then, TMS therapy in the office alongside ketamine. And we did that really to round out our offerings and provide more comprehensive care. We're still most enthusiastic about IV ketamine infusions because they simply work better, faster, safer than really anything else that's available today. But they don't work for everyone. They're not perfect. It's not magic, and they're not a great fit for everyone. So what do we do when people who come to us who have a need for something else? We were tired of having them try to find it elsewhere and not get good results. So we offer it in-house now. And with those other services, we're able to add insurance. So we now take every major payer, including Medicare in California, for the general psychiatry and the TMS. We did that to increase access to care, because the number one reason why people don't go forward with ketamine treatment is cost. And we charge $3,900 for a series of 6 infusions. That's a $300 intake fee up front, and then $600 for each infusion thereafter. It's not a crazy amount of money.
Which is quite reasonable compared to I've seen some clinics who are charging $1,000 to $1,500 per infusion.
Yeah.
That's a pretty reasonable number.
Well, and we deliver a really high level of service. We have a beautiful clinic. We have a 1-to-1 ratio of clinician to patient. We spend a lot of time with people. You're talking about earlier about what's good care. I mean, we spend a lot of time preparing people for the experience, supporting them through it, following up with them afterwards. My entire medical team is trained in preparation and integration. We use hospital grade monitoring equipment for their vital signs, which is something that I think is really overlooked by too many providers. We're measuring their pulse, oxygen saturation, EKG, blood pressure continuously the whole time. This medicine is super safe when it's used responsibly and therapeutically, but things can happen. And sometimes people have underlying medical issues or conditions. We've actually had people come in who we connected them to EKG and we said, or their blood pressure monitor, and said, we're not starting your treatment today and you need to go to the ER because you have an issue going on that needs urgent attention. We've seen that sometimes happen. So it's not even just about what ketamine can do to people or not do. It's about people walking around with other things sometimes. And, not everyone gets an annual physical. Not everyone's really taking care of their health. So we've caught some things that way, actually, and really helped some people out. So we're just super thorough in that way. But anyways, 6 infusions, $3,900. It's not pocket change. It's also not a ridiculous amount of money either. Again, especially for the level of service we provide. But we added these other insurance-based services or other services that could be covered by insurance to help people to get good quality mental health care who might not be able to afford ketamine. And we do also offer interest-free financing, and people can have between 6 to 14 months to pay that back. So without any extra fees. So that has also helped a lot of people. But even then, for some, it's just not feasible. And we're always looking at other ways that we can increase access to care and make it more accessible. I mean, we have a contract with Kaiser SoCal, and they're actually referring some patients to us and paying for them to get ketamine at our clinic. And that's been a wonderful thing for Kaiser and their members, and for us, for their most treatment-resistant depressive cases, that we can serve them and send them back for their continued care at Kaiser. And it's really progressive of them to be doing that. There's no other large payers that we know of who are consistently covering the cost of ketamine, but we do have these other services now that are covered, and we'll continue to add to the list as things become available that are evidence-based and actually help people. We're not biased towards or against anything other than what really works and produces results for patients.
So Spravato has become sort of the talk of the town over the last few years. I think it generated $1 billion in revenue for Johnson & Johnson in 2024. It is one that's been fully FDA approved, whereas some of the generic ketamines and compounding pharmacies haven't gone through that process. And I'm curious why, as a clinic, you have chosen not to include Spravato in what you offer.
Yeah. And by the way, when you were asking earlier about the view of who we are and what we're doing and maybe challenges around this, I would say that 2019, when the FDA approved Spravato, was a real turning point in the mainstream acceptance of the treatment, and that big pharma went from actively bashing ketamine to starting to promote it as
they
a good
do.
thing, or saying that that this was like that this, they try to still distinguish like the ketamine like nasal spray, and I'm like, okay, this is ketamine, but whatever. But yeah, so there was a big shift there. We are preparing to start offering Spravato. We don't offer it yet. It's in the works. I can tell you that when compared to IV ketamine, there is no comparison. That Spravato, from what we've seen, is about half as effective. And again, we're really just committed to what works, and the rapid and dramatic transformation that IV ketamine, when done, therapeutically, ethically, can produce, has been just night and day different. However, I think that Spravato, while it doesn't stand on a lot compared to IV, it does have something to offer when compared to other modalities. When you look at, and there have been some head-to-head studies about this. I believe
like
one
with antidepressants or
Yes.
things
Yeah.
like that, right?
Yes, Spravato compared to some conventional SSRIs and other, oral antidepressant medications, that it is a better, more efficacious medication. And one of the things is we offer TMS. TMS is great, but it requires a daily visit for 6 weeks, 5 days a week. And for those who may not know, TMS is, transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's using magnetic waves to stimulate neurons in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex in the front left part of the brain that are underactive or inactive due to depression. And it's a localized treatment. It's a drug-free treatment. It's covered by insurance. It's safe. It's effective. It's a good therapy. But for someone to come in 5 days a week for 6 weeks, it's really logistically prohibitive for a lot of people. And so Spravato is usually twice a week and then once a week, and then you kind of taper down a little bit from there. And maybe people come in once every other week or once a month for maintenance. So that's a much more favorable schedule and logistical hurdle than TMS for someone who's dealing with a treatment-resistant depression. So I would say that Spravato is a great advancement. I think it's unfortunate, and I think a lot of ketamine providers are frustrated that IV ketamine is a cheap generic medicine that is actually way more widely accessible, way less red tape and compliance regulatory headaches around it, and is actually way more effective, and it costs a lot less money, not only potentially to the patient, even with insurance coverage, but also to the insurance companies. And yet insurance companies are still paying $600, $700, $800, $900, $1,000 per dose of Spravato, and then also paying providers, whatever their schedules permit, instead of paying, it could pay a fraction of that for something that's essentially a more effective, more widely accessible medicine. I think that's where there's a lot of frustration that comes from people like in the ketamine field. Yeah.
Well, and I love that you bring this up, because I think I don't want to get too deep into the political side of things, and I will avoid saying any sort of specific names, but we're going through this time period right now where we're trying to assess where is there fraud, abuse, where is there sort of inefficient use of resources, especially when it comes to mental health. This is why I think psychedelics are so exciting. And I think this is a perfect example of what's wrong with our mental health care system. Is literally, if you go and look direct head-to-head, IV infusions versus nasal spray, IV infusions has a ton of clinical research. It's more effective. It's way less cheaper. And yet, it's not covered. I mean, there are, like, as you talked about with Kaiser, and I've talked with a few other people, there are unique ways that you can offer insurance for ketamine IV infusions, but it's very difficult. It's cumbersome. It's not just sort of plug and play like
Well, and there's a lot of risk.
Spravato.
There's a lot of risk that I had
Tell
a provider.
us about that. What's the risk?
Well, I had a provider call me last week, because some of the ways that providers are doing this with insurance is it's a gray area. And many things with insurance are a gray area. And even when you try your hardest to be compliant and to find what the right answer is, no one will give it to you, including and especially the insurance company. So we have this system where even when you're paying lawyers and consultants and doing research, and you're like, I'll do whatever the rules are. I'm fine with that. Just tell me what they are, and no one can give you a straight answer, no matter who you ask. That's a problem. There's a problem with that system, and so insurance companies just are masterful. I mean, they could literally teach the master class on inefficiency, on engineered inefficiencies that are designed to make things not work, because the longer that they delay, deny, and the more breakdowns and problems, the more confusion and chaos they create in their interest to not have to pay claims. It's really infuriating. But the providers some of whom I know have been able to use insurance for ketamine is they're billing for the covered components around the care, like monitoring, for extended observation, for office-based work, for things being done before or after. The problem is then insurance goes, well, this is a non-covered service, it's experimental, and none of those claims are valid. And as a matter of fact, the claims that I've paid you on for the last several years, you're going to give me all of that money back now. And I had a provider call me, it's called a take back, and it happens, and it's horrible, and it can absolutely, literally devastate or absolutely destroy a practice. I had a provider call me last week, no kidding, just last week, and say, hey, I'm having a take back. Can you give me some advice? And
wow.
they had done exactly what I just said. They billed for some of the care surrounding their ketamine clients' treatments, and insurance said, well, that's not covered stuff. We want the money back. And you can imagine as the years go by, that can start to turn into a significant sum of money that any practice, especially a privately held one, is going to struggle with. So we've opted not to do that. We've opted to be super duper careful in that regard, but at the cost of then, essentially it not being able to basically be paid for a lot of the work we're doing, because we're doing above and beyond what we're charging for. So it's a tough thing, Spravato, that's the other thing too, is a lot of providers are offering Spravato just because it's an insurance covered option for patients, not because they actually like it or think that it's good for patients. And I think that's really sad. And, a lot of people will say, yeah, IV's better in every way, but, Spravato's covered, so whatever. And it's like, that's a horrible reason why, there should be a widespread treatment for people. I think what trips me up is, I used to think that it was just about money. And if the insurance, that it's not about like the insurance company's desire to obviously help anyone with what's going to be the most effective for them. It's about what saves them money. But what started to get me was the fact that not only is IV better in its efficacy and safety profile, but it is way less money to the insurance company. And so then you have to really scratch your head. It's like, well, okay, you might not care about what's helping people more, but you do care about saving money. Why don't you want to pay for this thing instead of that thing? And I mean, you're talking about, it's literally, Spravato can be 800 times the price, literally. So then you go, okay, well, what's going on here? And I don't, like, to your point, I don't want to get too deep into the, corruption and political power, rabbit hole of healthcare in the United States, but it's pretty disheartening, to say the least. And it doesn't really make sense for anyone except for a very small, select group of people.
Yeah, I think that's something we can all agree on, that we're clearly sick as a country in many ways, and we do need a massive redesign. And I think that was going to be what I was going to lead into next as a question. It's, you've been doing this for over 11 years now. You're very familiar now with the mental health system as it works in the United States. We've been talking about insurance providers, obviously a lot of discussion on ketamine. But if you had the power to radically redesign the US mental health system using everything you've learned over these last 11 years, what would it look like, that redesign look like? And what would you get rid of first? What would be that first step?
That's a huge question. I mean, first and foremost, there would just have to be regulation of the insurance companies. I mean, they do whatever they want. They just get away with murder, literally. and there's no one holding them to account. And whether you're, Democrat or Republican, or you believe in, big government or small government or whatever, I mean, at the end of the day, you have these multi-billion-dollar companies that are making decisions that are impacting lives. They're putting, profits over everything else, and no one's holding them to account. There's got to be some accountability. And I think that's really at the root of the issue in many, many ways. And I'm all for, like, capitalism's fine. Like, make money. Great. We can make profit. Like, I want to have a profitable business. I want to make money. There's nothing wrong with making money. It starts to become a problem when that's the only thing that matters. It starts to become a problem when it's at the expense of people's health and literally lives. And so I don't know. I don't even know really where to begin other than to say that with your question. I can tell you that I would have a system that was designed with incentives built in throughout every step of the way, from down on the provider level to the insurance to the government. Every single vertical in healthcare, regulatory, people rendering care, people regulating the care, the people paying for it, the insurers, the patients, every single person would be incentivized for positive health outcomes. The whole system would be geared towards efficiencies in terms of what saves money for the entire system, for the patient's pocket, the insurance company, the government. Everyone would be incentivized to both save money and also maximize health outcomes. And those things are not exclusive. And when you look at, you talk about waste, fraud, and abuse. Oh my God. I mean, there is enough money for every single person in this country to be the healthiest specimen in the world, walking around like an example to be studied. I mean, the resources are there. We're not living in Haiti right now. We're not somewhere where there is just nothing other than just pure corruption and disorder. Like, the resources are there. They're not being utilized. The incentives are not there. So I would gut the system from the top down, bottom up, to incentivize high quality health outcomes. And that could be done for a fraction of the cost than what's currently spending. This BS naysayers that want to act like we just could never pay for the kind of results that would be better than what we're getting is BS, because the United States spends more than the next 10 developed nations combined on healthcare, and we're at like the bottom of the list of all of them on our outcomes. So it's the facts are the facts.
When I remember reading a headline the other day, which was something along the lines of some of the biggest food companies in the United States right now are very afraid because some of the decisions that are being made at the FDA will dramatically and negatively impact their bottom line, because it will require them to take out certain food additives that are highly carcinogenic, addictive, toxic, and it's kind of insane, as you've talked about, that we have a health system that is explicitly designed to keep people sick and extract profit from them. And I think the opportunity that psychedelics seem to be offering is for us to wake up from that system. And I feel like a lot of the people who are pioneers in the psychedelic space, including yourself and your dad, are asking this question about how do we do this better? Because how we've been doing it just it's not sufficient. It just doesn't work.
What I don't get is that this scarcity mindset that they can't make something that actually like makes money and it's also not killing people. Like, it just blows my mind, like certain things that are added to food that, like, why can't you come up with an alternative, even if it's like a penny more per package? Or, why can't you make that a little healthier? Why don't you do it without? Okay, so what, the additive dyes, maybe your whatever your product's like a little less brightly colored. Who cares? Like, does that really have to be? It's really kind of mind-boggling. You talk about the corruption. I mean, you look at like what Bayer just acquired Monsanto not that long ago, right? And Monsanto making Roundup, glyphosate, known toxic, causes cancer, known to cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Guess what? Bayer makes treatments for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So now you have, within under one roof now, you have the poison and the solution. And by the way, the solution isn't really a solution, because we don't want to cure you and we don't want to help you to actually kick this thing. We just want you to be a lifetime subscriber, take your treatment or your dose every day for the rest of your life, never die, never get cured. That's the perfect client for the current Western health model that we have. And it's pretty sickening. I mean, and literally sickening. You look at the health of the country. And I just don't think it has to be, one or the other, that we have to like actually do the right thing or have profitable companies. I believe every food company, every pharmaceutical company can make boatloads of money and actually do the right thing and actually provide a good quality product or service. And yeah, that's my view of it.
I like that. So my final question has to do with MDMA, psilocybin. Many of the listeners are aware of the decision by the FDA to reject MDMA-assisted therapy. This occurred in August. And I'm just curious about your lens as a CEO of a ketamine clinic. How do you think about these other sort of compounds that the FDA may approve? How do you prepare for that as a CEO? Are you really just saying ketamine is our lane, we are going to continue to focus on ketamine? Or were you starting some preparation to potentially offer MDMA, and when it was rejected, you kind of had to pull it off? How did that process impact you, and how do you think about, just in the next few years, if the FDA approves it, what you might do with those new psychedelic medications?
Yeah, we were definitely moving in the direction of being able to incorporate MDMA, and we're pretty surprised and disappointed, like many other people, of its deferred approval or rejection or whatever you want to call it. And I think that it taught everyone a lot about the FDA approval process and what needs to happen in terms of moving forward with MDMA and other psychedelic medicines. And it was a huge learning moment. I have a lot to say about kind of why it happened, how I think it happened. But to answer your question, we are committed to what actually produces results for people, and we're committed to healing and transformation. So right now, the vehicle's ketamine. We're not married to that. We're interested in what works. And it looks like MDMA and psilocybin and other psychedelic medicines have huge potential to really help people. And we would love to be able to offer them as soon as they're legally available. As far as what we're doing, we're continuing to grow and expand in terms of our service offerings, in terms of our team, the skill set, expertise, the backgrounds of people involved, because it really is increasingly more and more a multidisciplinary approach. And mental health is no longer just any one specialty at this point with psychedelics, like I was talking about with ketamine. And you have kind of anesthesia and you have psychiatry. I think there's nurses involved. So I mean, there's all different types. You have therapists and psychotherapy, and is that before, during, or after, all of the above of these medicine sessions. So it's just continuing to build and grow a place that is a safe and serene environment with many different backgrounds who can come together to deliver the best-in-class care. By taking insurance, we're now able to offer that for anything that is going to be covered. And we have self-pay, we have insurance, we have various physicians, psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners, RNs. And our office is structured in a way that can provide a private and serene experience for these different kinds of interventions. All of them seem to make mindset and setting are big. So having a clinic that's geared towards, and conducive to the right mindset for going into these journeys, these experiences, I think is going to lend itself well to whatever the actual substance, might be. And then I'd say the biggest thing of anything is really just being nimble and willing and able to pivot. So we're not so set in our ways in anything really that we're not going to just switch up where we need to in order to accommodate people.
You can be flexible in that way. There's some malleability there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's beautiful. When I'm looking at the photos of the clinic right now, and you're located in Los Angeles. Whereabouts in Los Angeles? Is it close to downtown?
No, we're in the Playa district, so we're on the west side, and right at the edge of where Westchester, Culver City, and Playa Vista all meet. Yeah, and we built it from scratch, so I did like the design and everything, and worked
cool.
with so we have like the walls are insulated. There's stuff in the ceilings as far as sound insulation. It's really been made to be a clean, quiet, safe, comfortable, cozy environment. So, sound is really big, not disturbing or disrupting people, their experience. We have noise canceling headphones and stuff like that. So just a lot of little details that make it a nice environment to have a peaceful inner journey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you guys, just as we wrap up today, if you do want to learn more about KCLA. You can go to ketamineclinics.com, which congratulations on the domain name. That's pretty epic. So ketamineclinics.com. I mean, I'm just looking up. If you look them up on Google, it's a 4.9 out of 5 rating. They have over 150 ratings. It's a beautiful center. This is really, world-class work that Dr. Stephen Mandel and Sam, who's here with us today for the podcast, are doing and have done. And I know many of our listeners are not located in Los Angeles, but if you have a friend or family member who's really looking for high-touch care at a beautiful center and they're in the Los Angeles area, make sure to send this their way, because both Sam and his dad are high integrity practitioners and business people, and the work they've done has really been pioneering in this space, and they continue to grow and learn and develop further. So Sam, it's been great to have you on the show today. Any sort of final parting words about maybe other assets or resources, or just something that you'd like to share before we close our conversation today?
Well, I just want to thank you for the generous acknowledgement, for having me today. It's been really a pleasure to chat with you, and thank you for the important work that you've done and continue to do to really advocate for psychedelic medicines and for healing and transformation for people. Creating this platform and the advocacy work that you do is huge. So thank you for that. And in closing, I would just say that this is incredible stuff. I mean, any powerful tool can cause harm if it's not used responsibly. And ketamine infusion therapy, when it is used therapeutically, ethically, responsibly, is really the fastest acting, safest, most effective depression treatment available. It's not perfect. It's not magic. Doesn't work for everyone every time, but it is absolutely life-saving for people. And I encourage anyone to reach out to us to learn more. Even if you're not in California, we're always glad to speak with you. We offer a free consultation, and I'm really passionate about helping just to, disseminate accurate information and help people to better understand what their options are. So I'll just leave with that, I guess.
And that's ketamineclinics.com. Check them out. And Sam, I appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Paul.
Thanks so much for watching. For a deeper dive into the power of microdosing with complementary practice and extra guidance, check out our best-selling microdosing course. It's a science-based protocol with dozens of best practices so you can customize your protocol to your unique needs and goals. Check out the link in the description below.